What the frick? Ah! The executor immediately makes a protective gesture and smacks his colleague upside the head. Ow! Winfred! The smell of this ointment is repulsive to the blood-sucking insects. Ah, based. Yeah, I understand that. How's it going, everybody? HoodlaMutt here with Sanator Scarlet Scarf. Yeah, this is another little seemingly short visual novel that I happened to pick up on a Steam sale one time. Seemed to do pretty well in terms of reviews. I guess this one actually has choices that matter, I believe, so it seems to be based in a sort of, what would you say, like a Victorian-era style thing with the plague doctors and whatnot. I don't know anything about it, though. I just know the plague doctor guy's there and then some girl with, I think, yellow eyes or something. I literally don't know anything about it, so there's nothing really to talk about. I don't know this developer. I don't know much of anything. So, I guess we'll just get right into it, and I hope you enjoy the story. By the way, I made my cursor a knife. It's technically a scalpel, but I wanted it to be a knife. So I can go up and be like, you know. I guess we'll... Do I click that? Okay. 6 days left until the epidemic. Well, that's pretty. We brothers of Saint Elmo don't have drinks in the morning. Richard talks through his teeth and frowns, all to try and seem more strict. But it seems he's just another lodger for old Magda. Not one of the brothers, not a sanator, not a hangman, and of course not a savior. More of a grandkid to be wined, dined, and well cared for to prevent him from losing weight. It's hard for Richard... Gosh dang, these are giving me giant paragraphs to read here. Okay. It's hard for Richard to acknowledge, but after the fear and hatred, after the futile, heart-wrenching hope, and the following bitter disappointment, after everything he had seen in the eyes of the commoners during the years of servitude, he likes Magda's attitude. That's why the brother does not want to quarrel with the old lady. He knows he'll hurt them both if he snaps and rudely shows her place in the strict Tentarian hierarchy. Tentarian? Okay. But Magda continues to fuss over him. How come, my dear? It's customary here in Riustald. From time immemorial, it is so. Beer in the morning won't get ye drunk. Only help your stomach wake up. Even my grandpa taught so. Trying to distract himself from this embarrassment, Richard imagines the drunkard who once lived in this house. Must have been a good old man. Richard never had relatives. He had a surname, Murdoch, but no family, only the Brotherhood. With Tentaria as your mother, and Elmo as your father, all good people from the frozen taiga to the shining milky mountains will call you brother. The high-flown words of the testament echo in his mind. No ale, no wine, no sleeper forbid, moonshine. Brew me the herbs, Magda. The old lady looks at him sympathetically and nods her gray head with concern. Got stiff bowels, darling? You can say it straight. There's no need to be shy. I'll cure you in no time. Not that brew. Another one. The one for the hangover. Interesting. While the old lady tries to digest this contradictory demand, Richard notices his shadow slowly coming to life. It ripples, then detaches from the wall the pale northern sunlight had pressed it against. What the frick? Ah! Shoo! Richard hissed, but the shadow has already awakened. It distorts and changes into the most grotesque forms, threatening to swallow the unsuspecting Magda, or cut her apart with sharp bird-like claws. Hey! Get out! Why do you talk to old Magda that way, grandkid? Hangover brew. So be it. Richard feels awkward and lies in response. It was a cat, sitting on the window. Magda turns around at last. The tranquil light of the last warm days of autumn falls through the dim, dusty window. It plays with the floating specks of dust, gleams off the jars of glass and copper. And only Richard and Magda stand in its way, casting two straight, still shadows on the plastered wall. Oh, okay. So that was just like a day? Okay, I guess it says the Chronicles of Riostald. So I'm wondering if this is just backstory, I guess. So then I could just start, but I guess we'll just keep doing this. "5 days left until the epidemic." Ooh, transitions. Richard steps silently under the countless arches of his dream's passages. The ringing of bells attracts him, drives him into the dusk-coated chambers. Their owner, Anga, stays frozen, turned aside, pretending the Sanator's coming means nothing to her. But Richard knows it is not so. His attention darts to her new creation, a huge, monstrous birdcage with the gates bent outward like the ribs of an autopsied cadaver. The Sanator is used to the Shadow's grotesque creations, the most vivid combinations of forms and images. Hadn't he seen them for years already? Today, however, Anga manages to impress him. "What is it?" Anga sighs and throws a brief glance at her guest.
"No greeting. No thanks from you. As usual."
Despite the unfriendly words, the tone of her voice tells Richard she's pleased with the question. "I like it, but something is missing." The Sanator isn't generous with his compliments, expecting a catch. Anga, as if expecting such a review, flashes a ragged smile and turns into smoke almost immediately. A trembling gust of it slides from the eerie chair, flowing to the cage. A moment later, a bizarre black bird treads the bone perch. "Ah!" she cries as she unfurls her mighty wings, slaps them against the bars, and bangs her beak on the metal.
"Ah, now I see. Well, I should have guessed. Will you sit in this cage now?"
"Oh, oh!" the bird answers and swells with clusters of open eyes. "Ew!" Richard sighs wearily, not impressed by the smoldering stare of a dozen pupils. "Why do you keep asking for it again and again, Anga? Don't you know the commandments?" The shadow bends lazily, sliding out of its cage in a stream of smoke, flowing through the bars like a mist, and adopting her human form again.
"I know they were never inviolable, Richard. I know all brothers violate them. You teach us, pamper us, let us out into the world."
Richard raises his finger, as if his words were a quote from the St. Elmo's Codex. "I am not the one accountable for my brothers. Am I to be their watchman?"
"Stop talking to me that way! I'm not your toy."
Richard frowns, lips pursing in a thin line, wrinkles cracking across his forehead betwixt his brows. He throws his hands up, showing that her accusations have nothing to do with him. "You should not look through my eyes now, Anga. This isn't about the commandments. This is about what you feel, what you desire." The shadow turns around, avoiding looking him in the eye, and the Sanator knows how angry she is. He must not leave her in such a state. So is Richard the Sanator? That's what I'm trying to figure out right now. Also, the shadow, he seems to know that I'm assuming it possessed her or something. I'm a little confused, I'm not gonna lie. "You should not hold on to your anger. Poison yourself. Obsess over impossible dreams. Trust me. I care about you. Ew! Without letting him finish, she turns around and hurls herself at him like a black cat, scratching and striking.
You idiot! She roars. To the sea with your caring. Let the Tenebras feast on your commandments. I only wish to live.
Richard waits without defending himself, and the strikes weaken, as if Anga was beating herself and not him. He is still calm and strict, showing none of his feelings on the surface. I'll do anything to keep you alive, he says. Even if you don't believe me, or don't have the patience. All to keep you from knowing the sea. I promise. She slumps against his chest, clutching his shoulders with sharp fingers.
Is there really no way?
Her eyes silently ask. Richard only shakes his head. It is not the time. I have no influence, no ink, no power. Vigilant eyes watch us all. He holds Anga and looks into her eyes. The seal pulsates between them. Trust me. Together we will make it to the end, and we'll be able to bypass it. Anga swells in his arms and rises triumphantly. Her shining eyes nearly throw sparks.
Your promise was honest. I felt it. I heard it. You were not lying.
Could I? Richard smiles, holding a bitter pain. Hiding a bitter pain. Oh, frick! I didn't see what that said.
Then go ahead. Act. Justify my trust.
Okay. Richard awakens, bringing the precious grain of the promise with him. Oh, he did not fib. There are ways to keep his promise, and he'll find them. I don't really know what's going on, dude. This is kind of confusing, to be honest with you. I think it's supposed to be, though, because this is just giving us some weird background, but he apparently knows the yellow-eyed girl, and she's possessed, or something, I guess, or I don't know. Calls her the Shadow, but also Anga. But it says, like, stop using Anga. I don't know. I don't know what's going on. 4 days left until the epidemic. The soul lies in a pile of ash, and blackened fingers dig into the dirty flakes of its last shelter. Again and again it struggles to restore the images of that world. Rays of sunshine and puddles, wet cobblestones and shining roofs, a sliver of sky. Only words left, without the names they used to use, and that, the other memory. That which they did. That which must not be remembered. A cry full of suffering and rage emerges from where the stomach once was. It struggles through the vortex of the throat, falls out of the mouth like a wingless bird, and drops down, its flight ended. The body, the memory of the body, writhes and shakes, giving birth to new cries again and again. As if rid of the remnants of flesh, as if repelling everything that could store this cursed memory. Until only ashes, a pale glow, and putrid fumes remain. The anger, the grief, and the despair grow and multiply in this new husk. With them comes the envy of those whose world has not yet crumbled into dust. And suddenly, a touch of strength, color, life. One by one, palms slide into the cloud of ash and vapor that her body has become. They shield, protect, and cover her essence from the swarming thoughts and reverberating cries. The pain is still with her, but already remote, alien, as if not hers. It is as if someone powerful took it away, pushed it aside, beckoned it to him. Do you remember? The voice seems to come from within, enveloping her with warmth. The soul remembers. Faces, voices, the old house, and the other things too.
I do.
She wants to name the entity embracing her, and the name falls readily off her tongue.
I remember, Lady Miliar. I can grant you return.
Ew, what is that? An outbreak of bright burning anger scorches the soul, making vapors and ashes stir violently. But Miliar's hands hold her together. Cool fingers absorb the raging flame, giving her the right to choose.
What should I do?
Seek the servants of the old master and destroy them. I glued your memory together, all that you've managed to carry through the houses. I grant you strength and time.
What if they have escaped?
Mella's laughter trembles, and so do the hands holding the soul, preventing her from crumbling and disappearing.
I'll find them, Lady Miliar.
Then look at me.
Come on!
The voice stops, waits, and then does not ask but orders.
Look!
A whirlpool of color catches the soul, and countless hands drag her deeper within it. A shining cacophony of thousands of images, sounds, and emotions storm into her mind, crumpling, twisting, and tossing her upward like a feather. Huh. I'm assuming this is Anga? Maybe. I don't know. Whoa, dude. Going into the stratosphere. Okay. On to day 3. This all means nothing to me as of now, so it's too disjointed and abstract for me to figure out what's going on. 3 days left until the epidemic. Despite the late hour, lights shine through the windows of the town hall. Executor Winfred yawns widely, trying to overcome his growing sleepiness. He hears footsteps and the creaking of oak floorboards downstairs. Brother Avis ascends, clumsily carrying an armful of old scrolls from the archive. The Sanator throws the pile of withered papers on the table, and Winfred, who chose a bad time to yawn, inhales a cloud of stirred-up dust and sneezes loudly. Okay, so there's multiple Sanators, so it's not just Richard. Okay. I thought maybe he was like the Sanator, but okay. Look what you are doing, complains the Executor, wiping his nose with a glove that still smells of a bonfire.
What?
Avis, wearing a mask, is seemingly unperturbed.
Winfred, help me stretch the scrolls.
The Executor simply looks at him silently.
We have to spread out the maps.
Winfred puts a hand to his ear and leans over to his colleague, pretending to be straining to hear. Speak clearly.
I said...
What? I can't hear anything. Finally, the Sanator rips off his mask and shouts in his high-pitched voice, no longer reverberating from inside the heavy beak. Dang it! Winfred, are you doing this on purpose? Smiling, Winfred spreads his hands in a peaceful gesture. Brother, have I ever lied to you? Take off your crow head more often, and you won't know where to hide from the wenches. Embarrassed, Avis puts his mask back on immediately, flipping numerous fasteners and stretching a creaky leather strap. The Executor sighs. Do you really have to wear that thing all the time?
I am a Sanator.
Nonsense! You are the only doctor in town who pretends to be a bird all the time. both when necessary and when not.
Or are you afraid of getting sick?
I've heard there are such. The executor twists his face, struggling to remember the proper word.
Hobias?
But Winfred understands the true reasons. It's not easy to win respect and recognition in the city when your appearance is at odds with the generally accepted idea of what the Brothers of St. Elmo look like. Or rather, what they should look like, in line with all the tales and superstitions. He decides to change the subject.
Well, why does Weiger need these maps all of a sudden? At this hour, no less.
Avis stumbles for a moment.
He did not say.
How come?
I don't know. He wasn't himself since this morning, as if something had happened.
I see.
He was looking completely past me. Do you remember the Helsingborg plague? The one that happened 5 years ago? He was there. He and Richard.
Winfred rubs his chin thoughtfully, but suddenly he laughs out loud, addressing his confrere with a deliberate mocking.
Or maybe he just couldn't hear you. Take off that beak.
When the plague will strike, you will be the first scrambling to wear the same one.
The executor immediately makes a protective gesture and smacks his colleague upside the head.
Ow! Winfred!
Don't you jinx us. Once again serious, Winfred approaches the window and gazes thoughtfully into the distance. Between the steeples and weather vanes, into the cold, thickening darkness. He stares at the lights dying in the windows for a long time. At the Ruhestald wrapped up in the evening fog, then says barely audibly,
"Just what we needed."
Interesting. Okay. I'm trying to start to piece stuff together. I think they're just showing all the main players in the main story and just kind of showing like their relationships to each other and stuff, maybe. So that's my guess. But I liked those two. Those two were fun. All right. 2 days left until the epidemic. The gingerbread quarters of Ruhestald doesn't smell of gingerbread at all. It may disappoint the few guests of this northern outpost, but it's merely the dwelling place of wealthy merchants, petty nobles wary of debauchery, and prosperous artisans. In short, the place is boring and mediocre, almost the same found in most Tentarian towns spread from the frozen taiga to the Milky Mountains. Today, several houses surround a well-kept courtyard, which is unusually crowded, as exorcist brothers finish placing the seals on the doors of rich citizens. Interesting. Brother Weiger, the Grand Exorcist of Ruhestald, stands aside and oversees the work of his subordinates, occasionally correcting them and giving instructions. Soon only one door is left. Weiger raises his hand and sternly says to the young brother, diligently drawing the lines of the last seal,
Draw more smoothly. Think of this as the door to your own house.
Despite the strict tone, Weiger is not too angry at the negligence of his subordinates. The local who paid for the seals for himself and his neighbors is just an odd fellow. Superstitious fear sometimes pushes citizens to very eccentric acts, and yet the Brotherhood honors its reputation. They will place the seals in such a way that no spirits, Tenebras, or even Mela Miliar herself may step inside these walls. Okay, so Miliar, Lady Miliar, whoever that was, must be like some sort of a evil entity. I'm getting like eldritch vibes going on here, so, okay. Many years have passed since Weiger had put on the crow mask, but surging memories of those dark days worry him, giving rise to a vague anxiety in his soul. He thoughtfully strokes the tip of the beak on his white mask covered with patterns of the seal, and the memories instantly explode in a cascade of monstrous images. Ooh. Houses burning like giant bonfires. Parades of white crosses drawn in chalk on hastily boarded doors and shutters. The howl of a fiery storm devouring plague-infected corridors. And the smell that even incense and spicy herbs stuffed into his mask's beak cannot kill. Sickening and sweet, bitter, burning the throat. He will remember it forever, even if the sleeper has mercy on him and all other images suddenly fade. The exorcist shudders and shakes his head, wishing to rid himself of the evil thoughts. He will not let fear take hold of him. Not now. Not ever. Isolated cases of a disease not yet studied are no reason to announce the beginning of an epidemic. Yet, he should send a raven to Dolerberg, just in case. Oh, hey, look. Little kid. With his peripheral vision, Weiger notices movement and turns his head. At one of the doors, a freckled girl of about 8 years old is enthusiastically rubbing at the freshly created seal.
Hey! Scram!
The girl notices Weiger and sticks out her tongue in response, chuckling. The Grand Exorcist is not irritated. The seals cannot be destroyed that easily. Neither can a palm erase them, nor a chisel chip them, nor even the endless northern showers in cold October wash them away. The brothers of St. Elmo alone know their secrets. But feeling that the shadow stretched out by the midday sun has stirred a bit, Weiger realizes that it is time to teach the wretch a lesson of respect for the Brotherhood. A lesson that all good people of Tentaria must learn sooner or later.
You little prankster.
Weiger takes off and strides toward the girl, but she squeals and rushes away. The exorcist follows her into the alley under an arch and strides faster. Very soon he catches the mischievous girl in a narrow and stuffy dead end. Love the art, by the way. Gotcha! Looking back at the approaching brother, the girl frantically bangs her tiny fists on the door upon which the seal is already whitening. Finally, the door swings open, and the frightened child rushes to safety under the skirt of a woman who appears in the doorway. Weiger looks up and recognizes the pale Fraugian. What the frick? Weiger looks up and recognizes the pale Fraugian. That, he recalls, must be her name. I don't know if I pronounced that right, but that's what I'm going with. The woman timidly moves away, and quietly, as if she herself is somehow guilty, asks, "What did she do, good brother? My little birdie." The exorcist softens his look, but his tone is strict.
Your birdie tried to erase the seals.
Frau Gian spanks the girl right through the fabric of her emerald dress and huffs. "You're completely out of control, little brat!" She then asks the Grand Exorcist in an ingratiating tone, "Don't punish her, for the sleeper's sake. I'll do it myself. Please don't, good brother." Weiger just shrugs it off and is about to leave, but Frau Gian, looking a bit askance, adds, "And these drawings? To be honest, we never asked Heinrich to deface our doors. They're made from solid Encoria wood, not forged from old pipes like his own." Drawings! The exorcist throws his hands up in indignation and responds with bitter irony.
Oh, so the door is defaced. Well, as you wish. I'll order my men to erase the seal immediately. If you prefer the visits of spirits, that's your choice. And may the sleeper keep you safe.
Weiger barely manages to turn around when the woman, already breaking into tears, grabs him by the edge of his cloak, terrified.
Oh, forgive my ignorance. I did not know. Don't erase it.
For a few moments, the exorcist looks into Frau Gien's wet, wide-open eyes. Perhaps his words were a bit excessive.
Farewell,
he says.
Sleeper bless you, good brother.
Upon leaving, Weiger hears the door bolt click, and behind it Frau Gien starts scolding the child. Only now does he allow himself to smile slightly underneath his mask. The exorcist glances at his shadow, stretched out by the dim northern sun, and it seems to tremble, chuckling in response. Interesting, okay. So we're getting a little bit of context now, so they're definitely worried that something's obviously coming, so... But is the plague like an actual sickness, or is it like this darkness, this shadow that they're talking about? Because their shadows keep coming to life, you know what I mean? So, I don't know what kind of a plague this actually is. Okay. One day left until the epidemic. Despite the early hour, the street is empty and lifeless. Uneasy anticipation grips the whole area. It bristles with the teeth of lowered gratings and the shields of locked shutters. There are no voices. Only the wind rustles carelessly with yellow whirlwinds of dust and fallen leaves. Avis feels many frightened eyes are watching him. All of them expect something from him, rely on him. Not only on him, on all the brothers. And Avis becomes ashamed that their hopes are beyond the Brotherhood's abilities. Everyone in the fortress is waiting for a crow from Dolerberg, as if the letter could stop the number of the sick growing every day. Okay, so it is a sickness of some kind, okay.
I'll bet they write something like, "We recommend a quarantine and harsh measures."
Avis thinks with a bitter smile. He is not afraid of the scale of a possible epidemic. An unknown disease. That's what is scary. Meanwhile, the city becomes dangerous. While pious citizens sit in their homes, others less pious are out on the streets of Ruhestald. If the Brotherhood starts doing badly, a riot is inevitable. Very soon, he will not risk walking the streets alone. Avis walks into another alley. The echo of his steps reflects from the walls, dissolving into the damp gloom. Only one house left. Once he checks it, his round is over. The Sanator knocks with a rusty door knocker and asks the usual question, trying to speak as low as possible.
"Good citizens! Is everyone healthy?" "We are alive,"
a voice responds, muffled by the thick door. Not too detailed, but Avis does not need more. Sick people would surely beg for help. He is not mad at those who have not opened the door for him. The Sanator leaves, happy with the realization that there will be no more victims on this shift. But how long will it last? Distracted by gloomy thoughts, he steps on something and feels an unpleasant crunch under his feet. Avis lowers his gaze, and cold sweat covers his forehead. Ew! On the ground, there are dead birds, all covered in blood.
"What in the tenebras?"
Composing himself, the Senator carefully examines the birds, not daring to bow his head too low. Pigeons, crows, all torn crosswise. He looks around in haste, suppressing a quick flash of fear. There is no one around. Only the wind wails mournfully against creaky weather vanes and ripples through sun-bleached flags. He shifts his gaze, and for a moment it seems to him that something is hanging from a weather vane. A shining scarlet ribbon soars in the wind. pulsing, wriggling, as if it were alive. Avis steps back in disbelief and frantically rubs the red glass lenses of the crow mask with his palms. When he opens his eyes again, the teasing scarlet ribbon is nowhere in sight. Was it a vision? Indeed, he hardly slept that night. He and Weiger marked infected houses on the map. With every pin he put down, Weiger changed his expression but remained stubbornly silent in response to questions.
We'll see after the autopsy.
Weiger kept repeating, as if reassuring not Avis but himself.
For now, this is mere speculation. The infection might be spreading from underground. Is this...
Avis stops his thought and hastily signs himself with a protective gesture. Quickly, to the fortress. Ooh. Ooh. Interesting. Okay. Bad omen. Alright, well, I guess, that must have been like just the lead up to the actual game, so very, very interesting. Alright, I guess we'll see what is up with this plague then. I'll be honest, I'm kind of just here for the ride at this point. I mean, I don't really have much to say. I'm just kind of trying to take it in and absorb it. So I guess we're kind of just figuring this out together at this point. Ew. Don't laugh. The hours just before dawn are the quietest. Carriage wheels aren't rattling on the pavement, and neighborhood goodwives aren't gossiping while leaning out of their windows. Even the birds sound too timid as they start their morning songs. Only a few windows, those of the rich people's houses, are lit with lamplight. The servants in there tiptoe around quietly, cooking breakfast and cleaning their master's clothes. And then the dawn rises in the east, and gentle sunlight paints the pavement, wet from the morning dew, gold and pink. A new day has come. A new day has come. People's voices and the creak of shutters can be heard over the light-hearted chirping of the birds. The shutters open one after the other, like the wooden eyelids of the town, letting the warm sunlight in. A cold drought is creeping through the cracks in the window frame. Richard Murdoch cringes as he tries to find a warm spot on his narrow bed. Sleep clings to his eyelids with its soft fingers, warms his temples, and begs him to stay for a minute or two. Don't listen to the morning drowse. You will be cheated. The trickster will steal your morning freshness and vanish, leaving you with a heavy head and a bad mood. Richard gets out of bed, shakes off his drowsiness, and puts on his clothes, while listening to old Martha clinking the dishes downstairs. While waiting for his breakfast, he looks out of the window, casually counting the plumes of smoke billowing up towards the sky. The wind smells of dampness and burnt leaves, the usual autumnal fragrance, yet something in it feels off. A timid knock on the door comes at last. Martha's fear used to hurt him, and it took him some time to understand and forgive the commoner's attitude. His breakfast is waiting behind the door. There is warm bread and sliced cheese, a boiled egg, some greens, garlic, and a mug of steaming herbal infusion. A simple, homely meal hardly fit for a man of his standing. But Richard always puts his habits before his status. Sipping the flavorsome drink, Richard grins as he recalls his argument with the housekeeper. For quite a while, the poor woman simply refused to realize that starting a new day with a pint of beer is against his grain, and tried to wine and dine him properly. He had to coldly reprimand her, but the fresh, minty aftertaste and the tranquil vigor were worth it. Yeah, okay, so that was what we saw, was that kind of, you know, not a flashback, but whatever you want to call it, the prequel to that. So, okay, that just gives us a little context, I guess. Naturally, he had to collect and prepare the herbs himself. Even the local herbalists, whom one would expect to be well versed in their craft, turned out to be rather ignorant when it came to something other than laxatives and hangover remedies. If it weren't for the greenhouses of the Brotherhood Fortress and his own foraging in the forest, Richard would have long forgotten the taste of his favorite cordial. After finishing his breakfast, Richard heads downstairs and out into the inner yard. Here, in a rickety shed covered in the shadows of a sprawling old apple tree, is where he keeps his workwear. It's not quite so easy to put it on every day. The first thing he puts on is a greasy ointment, which has a slight swampy odor to it. Richard rubs it on his wrists, knees, and neck. It's a fairly extravagant concoction, but an effective one. The smell of this ointment is repulsive to the blood-sucking insects. Ah, based. Yeah, I understand that. Tons of mosquitoes where I've been before, so, yeah, that sucks. I grew up just, surrounded by freaking forest, and you would just get destroyed by mosquitoes as soon as you walked outside. It sucked, man. After that, with the greatest precautions, soft leather gauntlets were put on, well worn with years of labor. Wide flared cuffs make them look like the wingtips of a strange bird. Now, all there remains to do is to pull on his high boots, to don and gird a heavy robe smelling of tar, and of course, to put on his mask. This heavy white mask with reddish lenses over the eyes is stuffed with herbs: basil, thyme, garlic, rosemary, pepper, mint, marjoram, all finely chopped and tightly packed inside. The smell is so strong that an unprepared person would start feeling dizzy at once. A price he has to pay, a minor one compared to all he has to do. All those devoted to this craft have to. Nay, Richard is not a jester, nor, sleeper forbid, a cesspit cleaner. The gleaming glasses of the heavy beak full of incense speak for themselves. The Sanator brother, Richard Murdoch, likes to call himself a soldier, and his battlefield lies within the cities and villages of Tentaria. His enemies, the invisible and ruthless plagues that harvest human lives year by year. Many would think of him otherwise, though. The Sanator walks down the street, and people move aside, frightened, not wishing to be touched even by his shadow. According to local superstition, which the Brotherhood of St. Elmo had been unsuccessful in eradicating, the shadow of a hangman, a gravedigger, or a senator could give disease to sinful people. But who can claim to be without sin these days? Even without personally killing people, in the eyes of terrorized citizens, Richard was both the sinner and the saint. He would verify the verdicts of fate and sign them, marking doors by chalking the sign of the cross upon them. His hands would cure, but they were also stained with blood, and his clothes reeked of smoke. It was not he who would throw a torch into one's sickbed, who would nail down doors and windows, who would wheel piles of corpses away on a creaky cart in order to burn them. But still, through the red lenses of his mask, he could see the suffering of those visited by senators. Large families or singletons, rich and poor alike, none saw mercy from pestilence, or from Richard. He had been offered money, but had never taken it. He had been begged, but always remained silent. He had been cursed, but would simply move on to the next house. Richard is a senator, a plague doctor. Such is the fee his job exacts. Today, unfortunately, more mournful laborers are waiting for him. A few days ago, a sick man was found on Merchant's Lane, dying from bloody gashes on his neck, belly, and chest. His skin was cracking, and ichors mixed with blood oozed from his body. staining his clothes and adorning them like a horrible scarlet scarf. Since then, 17 more citizens have fallen ill, and the quarter has been quarantined. Hey, they said the thing! They said the thing! Scarlet Scarf! At the end of the street, before the entrance into the formerly clean and bright gingerbread quarter, the Sanator is greeted by a rude slapdash barricade that looks as if it were built by the rabble-rousers piling up junk to incite the people. There are planks, barrels, and even a single cartwheel. Some wicked troublemaker had hung a dirty black cloth over it, and now it's billowing in the wind like a cursed banner of infamy. This time, it was not the rioters who had built the defenses, but some negligent guardsmen who hadn't bothered to build a decent barricade. This was easy to understand, though, as boards and stones could rarely stop the plague, especially given the nighttime guests, the morticians carting the tarry sacks away, and the sanators taking the sick to the infirmary. The guards' halberds are there to curb the marauders' avidity, nothing more. 2 men are waiting for Richard right at the barricade. The small, skinny man is Brother Avis, in wondrously clean clothes, not at all stained with blood. The other, who seems even bigger next to his partner, is Brother Wingfred, an executor with a bludgeon and a short sword on his belt. Richard touches the brim of his hat as a greeting and hurriedly asks the main question that had been nagging him for several days.
Any responses from Dolerberg? The Raven returned before the dawn. Nothing reassuring. The malady is unknown. They recommend quarantine and rigorous measures.
The Sanator swings his hand resentfully, as if to grab the throat of the ones giving such orders.
If we can't stop it within a week, Ruistalt will be closed. Darn it! How can we stop an unknown plague in only a week? And what of the sick? How was the night? 3 died, and those ridiculous rumors about the Scarlet Scarf are spreading again. People say they've seen it on some houses.
Avis stops, then nervously shudders and moves his beak sideways, momentarily resembling a bird even more.
It's strange, but today, it seemed for a moment that there was something hanging from the weather vane. It's just your fatigue, Avis. Get some rest. We've got an autopsy tonight. Richard, do check the houses just in case. The Walders, the Hines, and the Wigmars. You know where they live?
Richard nods in agreement, and the tip of his beak swings along with his confrere's words.
Remind me about the Hines. Their house is up the street, on the left. It's the one with tiger violets on the windowsill. All right. Avis, we should get going.
Winfred starts to turn away, but stops, remembering something.
By the way, Richard, are you armed? As usual. Is there anything to beware out there? Avis said he'd seen some marauders, but they fled. The guards wouldn't say anything. I wonder if they're on the same side. The houses here are filled with valuables.
Richard shrugs. The threat seems insubstantial to him.
I don't think they'd dare attack a brother. Cornered rats bite. But personally, I don't believe in marauders that much. Winfred, do I look like a liar to you? Calm down, Avis. I mean the ones you saw might not be human.
The Sanator hastily makes a protective sign.
Sleeper forbid! Better not even think that it could be the one hanging out the scarves. A marauder or a spirit. It's all the same. Both spread the disease. Anyway, it should all become clear tonight.
Winfred lifts his hands in dismay, and it seems like he's grinning under the mask.
See you at the fortress. May the sleeper help you.
The brethren leave, and Richard follows the path, getting across the barricade and entering the plague's domain. He walks past guardsmen playing dice in front of two smoky, pungent fires, and turns onto the lane. This is a shortcut to the houses marked with the mysterious scarlet ribbon. And Richard doesn't want to frighten the people who are trapped near the plague with his appearance.
No!